we have women of color talking about money in a way that we are not used to talk about money. From the mindset perspective, from the family perspective, the beliefs that we have to go through. And because you are part of this show, that is what really, really matters with money. This is the Brown Way to Money podcast, where women of color in business find their financial independence path. Because financial success is within our reach, but by playing by their rules, it is only going to take us halfway there. To succeed, we must take ownership of our voice with money. So, welcome to the Brown Way to Money podcast. But before we start, very quick, what an extra $500 will do for you or for your business this month? Well, maybe that is for payroll, to get that social media strategy, or to simply go and relax this month, take a massage, whatever it is. You could be the receiver of one of the micrograms we give here at the Brown Way to Money. If you want to have a chance to be the receiver of these micrograms, then pay attention to the secret word on this episode, and then go to brownwaytomoney.com and submit your application. I will start straight away with the question that is burning for our audience. Starting from zero can feel overwhelming for many entrepreneurs. She is working on her business, building her business, but it is feeling this pressure of family pressure, debt pressure, financial pressure in all the ways possible, and is juggling that kind of two worlds. So what is the most practical habit that you can tell them to move towards financial independence?
Love that. Well, thank you for having me. And I was that woman. I mean, I started my business back in 2016 and have been hustling for the last 8 years. And so when you're describing, I was like, oh my gosh, are you talking about me? Right. And so something that I would say, practically speaking, that I wish I had implemented sooner, but I only implemented really in the last 3 years or so, is what I call screenless Sundays. And so I was raised Catholic. And so, on Sundays, we're supposed to rest and go to church and all of those things. Right. But I have since repurposed Sundays to be what I call screenless Sundays, in that it is a day that I actually get my life back in order, do the things that require my attention when it comes to taking care of myself, particularly around my health. And I call it screenless Sundays because it's so easy on your day off to, spend your day watching TV or just running errands or scrolling through the internet. And so what I do on Sundays as a habit is, if not for the whole day, at least for a couple hours of that day, I will take my phone, I will lock it in my car, and I will use that time to do one of three things. I will work on my budget. I will work on kind of resetting the house for the week, as in just making sure that things are where they're supposed to be. Or I will use that time to exercise or meditate. And that one habit, doing that weekly, I've gotten to the point where I can go screenless the whole day on Sundays, which is really great. But even if you can't do it the whole day because you've got a lot, practically speaking, doesn't work for you, even doing 3 hours a week of just putting your phone away and actually spending some time for yourself will actually put you forward in your business versus just working in your business all the time.
Let's stop a little bit right there. And of course, you're talking about habits because that's the whole building. And I want to dive into that in a little bit later. But practically speaking, how does one that maybe is running her business through her phone or is doing a lot of stuff through her phone allow herself to take that space? Because the first month or so is going to feel like something is happening out of this world. How do you take that space for yourself as a conscious decision?
Yeah. So, and why this is so related to money habits is that I figured out that a lot of women in particular, women of color in particular, we look at increasing our income as the ticket to freedom. And that is absolutely true, but it's not really freedom if you are emotionally drained and you're physically unhealthy. And so the way that I have framed this to my clients who have a really hard time taking time for themselves is, first, you need to put your immediate family on notice. And you need to say it. You need to say, hello, family. there are, for the next couple hours, I am unavailable. Do not ask me where your toys are. Do not ask me what's for lunch. Like,
Right.
y'all can figure yourself out for the next 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Then number 2 is I also put my clients on notice. My clients are fully aware that they're able to reach out to me, but I will not respond until I'm back on business hours. So letting your clients know that. The third part, and this is the hardest part, is unfortunately, a lot of women learn this the hard way, as in something catastrophic happens, as in like they get really sick or someone else gets really sick. We just talked about this, right? Like when you're down as an entrepreneur, like you're not making money.
Exactly.
So you really have to look at this and say, okay, I feel okay now, but if I want to do this for a long time and I want to be able to run a business sustainably, then actually resting and truly resting for a couple hours a week, not just like at night, is absolutely critical for your business to be successful. And if you think that working all day, every day at hardest, like it might work for a year or two, but I've been at this for 8 years now. You will not sustain.
Exactly. No, I completely agree with you. I have been on this road for 7 years. And the one thing that I know that is not going to be sustainable is the thing that is draining energy that I need to, like, I feel I need to push all the time because it is not sustainable. Like things that take out your energy, that take out your time and space. And like you said, don't recharge you and don't bring back that creativity, that solution seeking space on your mind, are not going to be the things that you need to grow a business and eventually plug and play into your financial independence path. So from your own journey, I want to hear about your own journey of being a Filipino American growing up and really tackling that debt all the way to become an entrepreneur, sharing this story that it can be a lot of, or it can be charged with a lot of shame sometimes.
So I was born and raised in Queens, New York. I am my father's 8th child out of 9. He had 7 kids in his first marriage and 2 kids in his second marriage. I'm being from the second marriage, and it was complicated. It was complicated growing up in the sense of my, I would say identity wise, I was always kind of challenged of like, where do I fit in? I realized I learned about race kind of early on, in the sense of I actually remember going to apply for my first library card in like 4th grade, and they ask you, what race are you? And I put white, and my mom was just like, what are you doing? And I was just like, what's Asian? Like what's Latino? Like I don't think I'm Black, so I must be white, right? Like, and I just and throughout my childhood, like I had my babysitter was Mexican. I was then also raised by people who were in my family who were like immigrants from the Philippines. Then I moved to a neighborhood where it was predominantly white, Greek, and then I moved to another neighborhood where it was Asian but not Filipino. And so I spent a lot of time just trying to navigate, like, where do I fit into all of this? And then when you overlay the Filipino culture of, very Catholic, like very community based, like you have to save face. You can't tell people that you're struggling. You can't let people know that you have money. You always have to look like your Sunday best kind of thing. A lot of the messaging I got around money was that we don't have enough, but it was only inside the house that we talk about that. But outside the house, we have to pretend like we have enough and we're successful. And so that was really hard to reconcile for a long time for me.
Yeah. Because I feel that the Filipino and the Latino, I am originally from Colombia. So there are a lot of similarities, I guess, for the Spanish heritage that we have there. But when it comes to money, the one thing that we have in common that Spanish people still have is that it doesn't matter how much you are struggling. It doesn't matter how sick you are. It doesn't matter how in your inner self is. The moment that you need to speak about money to somebody else that is outside of your comfort zone or your social circle that you trust, you have to be and perform your best. I have not seen that in cultures like the Dutch one. I live in the Netherlands. The Dutch, they really tell you how it is. They don't, if it is bad, it is bad and that's it. But for us, it is like living a double life in a couple of seconds. How did that affected your own journey to understanding your money story and later on really taking ownership of your money story and making these investments, and now that your net worth is in the millions and all of that?
You know what? It's the first time I've heard someone describe it that way. And I feel like that's actually incredibly accurate. Like this double life that you said, right? Is that we have to act one way in one group and another way in another group. And, you know, in the psychology world, we call that code switching, right? It's just like, depending on who we're around, we got to figure out what's the way that I need to show up here. And to be honest, it's exhausting. It's just exhausting, right? Like I love when you kind of mentioned the Dutch. I've never been around the Dutch, but like, you know, I think it's fascinating how certain cultures are like. The French are kind of like stereotypically, they're like, we don't care what other people think of us. We'll just do what we want kind of thing. And I've always found that like, wow, that must be so refreshing. That must be so lovely to just show up in whatever space you want and just show up exactly as you feel like you can show up. And so it took a lot of energy. I also consider myself to be an introvert. So then I overlay this thing of like, it takes a lot of energy for me to recuperate after like long, engagements or conferences and stuff like that. And I decided actually last year that I would just stop doing that. That I would, however I feel like that day and however I want to show up in that room is just how I'm going to show up. And so it started out with minor things where I, you know, stopped trying to style my hair to like fit in a certain way. I stopped I hated wearing pencil skirts. Or suits and stuff. And I just stopped wearing those, even though like in my, you know, sometimes I do corporate speaking engagements and I think that's what I'm supposed to wear. And I decided, you know what, like this is the beauty of financial freedom, is that at some point you can actually just show up to rooms and just be who you are and not feel like you have to live a double life.
It is time for Brown Weight Unfiltered, where we take a moment to talk about the one thing with money, the one belief, the one conversation that you were too scared to talk about. But when you did, everything changed for the better. That's right, sis. We are going to go there. This part of the podcast is brought to you by The Money Mindset Hub, a financial education platform for female entrepreneurs who are ready for financial independence. One of my favorite segments on the show. So, Bernadette, I want to ask you, what was that one belief, one conversation, one topic that you were so scared to talk about with your family, with your friends, but when you did, everything changed. Everything changed for the better?
Well, there are quite a few, but the one that comes up to mind right now is letting my family know that I was actually going through a depressive and anxiety like state to the point where I had to go on medication. And it happened during the pandemic. And it also happened around the time that my father passed away. And honestly, it was a really hard conversation. I had conversations with family members who basically said, what do you have to be sad about? Like, what's wrong? Like, what's wrong with you? You know? And then there were other friends of mine who were like, who I knew wouldn't and don't and probably will never go to therapy. And, you know, it was hard for me to say to them, you know what, I go to therapy and it's really helpful for me. And these are the things that I'm working on. And, you know, like I was never trying to push it to other people, but there did come a point where, and this is where things really changed for me, which was I learned that being the only one in my friends who was going to therapy, that I then became the therapist for a lot of my friends.
Happens.
And
yeah.
I'm not trained to do that. And I'm not an expert in that. And also, you know, there's a little bit of resentment, if I'm being totally honest, to be like, hey, how come I'm paying like thousands of dollars for therapy and y'all just get all the nuggets for free? Like,
yeah.
So it was really hard to talk about my personal mental health and when it was like at its low point. But what really changed for me was that the few people who are actually incredibly supportive. They're still like, my really great friends now. I've learned, unfortunately, to let go of some relationships, or at least not expect much from other relationships if they weren't supportive of that. Me speaking about it actually encouraged one of my family members to do the same thing and go to therapy. And that was
Amazing.
really great for our whole generation.
Brown Weight Unfiltered was brought to you by The Money Mindset Hub, a financial education platform for female entrepreneurs ready for financial independence. Check out the fastest way to grow with your money at themoneymindset.hub.com. That is themoneymindset.hub.com. I love it. And you have said it really, that's the beauty of financial freedom. So building on that financial freedom and circling back to your book, those habits, how important are they? And what are those habits that we need to start really considering? 2025 is coming. It's like a clean slate for you to sit down and say, at least I'm going to master these 2 habits that will get me there. What are some of those habits that you consider people cannot go anywhere without them if they want to build that financial freedom?
Yes. So specifically, I decided to write this book about habits versus just knowledge, because there's so many books about financial literacy, but just because we know better doesn't necessarily mean that we do better. And I've learned that through coaching. I mean, most of us know you make money and then you spend less money and hopefully you save the difference. I mean, that's basically what a lot of personal finance is. But I decided to write 25 habits in particular because really, if you want to change your trajectory of financial independence, you have to do things. You can't just think it and know it. You have to do it. And habits are really important because not only do you have to do them well, you have to do them consistently. So the 2 habits that I really like that I talk about in the book that I think anyone can take anywhere is one is called the dollar rule. And I guess this is kind of unique to the American, but you can translate it into your local currency here. But essentially, I've said to myself, when I look at intentionally spending my money on things that I don't necessarily need, if it comes out to $1 per use, then just go ahead and buy it and stop overthinking it. Common example I use for myself is like, I love clothing. I love home furnishings. I love little souvenir type things or whatever. And sometimes I'll feel really guilty about spending on something, even though I absolutely love it. Right. And how the dollar rule really changed for me and for a lot of my clients is say, okay, if you're going to buy something, then as long as you get good use out of it and it doesn't just collect dust in your place, and that you actually get good quality thing, then go ahead and buy that and stop using your brain power on small purchases and use that brain power towards larger decisions like investing or building your business. And so I really love that because it's really changed my perspective. I've actually bought a lot less things. People come to my house and they're like, you don't have a lot of stuff. And it's just like, yeah, but everything that I have here, I really love.
Right.
And the second habit that I think anyone can use anywhere is what I call the cash flow cushion. And a lot of us talk about emergency funds, 3 to 6 months of emergency savings that, you hear that a lot, but most people don't talk about having an actual cushion sitting in your checking account where your daily expenses come out of. So what I teach my students is to calculate how much money you would need in a month for your basic living expenses. So your health expenses, your food, your transportation, your utilities, and your housing. And whatever that amount is, that's just making sure that there's food in your belly, there's a roof over your head, and the lights are on, right? And what I found is that even when people are making good money, they might still be living paycheck to paycheck because they're waiting for the next paycheck to show up. But if you have this cushion sitting in your checking account, then you're actually a paycheck ahead. And then you won't be stressing as much waiting for that next paycheck to arrive.
I love that. So this really fits with on the Brown way to money. So the Brown framework is a financial independence framework that I work with. And the W is what is the plan? And what I'm hearing here is that these habits are responding directly to the question, what is the plan? How are you going to take everything that you know to implement it? One way, like you said, is have that month of cushion. Perfect. I love it because if tomorrow something happens, listen, as an entrepreneur, and we said it just a little bit ago, if we are not working, maybe your income is not going to be done for those 3 weeks that you were sick. I'm talking about like my experience. I've been for 3 weeks sick. The income is not going to stop because we have been like, we built a strong business for that to avoid that. But in our mind is like, you are not doing something. Like you are literally sitting on the couch because you cannot move. What are you going to do? If I didn't have that caution, if I didn't have the plan, the understanding and money saved up, I wouldn't be able to stay on the couch and rest. I would have to do something because the stress, because of how I'm going to fix this will wake me up from whatever, resting I was doing. Here, I love that you mentioned these 2 habits because you really talked about the strategy of it. And I agree with you 100%. It is not about what we know, but how we apply it. And it is not just about spend less than you earn. Yes, that is like the basic universal understanding. But I truly believe as a woman of color, if we want financial independence, we have to bring something different to the table, like intentionality, which is what you mentioned on the first habit. How intentional are you? What that means to you, what you have in your house. I'm not a person that buys everything and anything. I'm not a person that likes luxurious objects, but I'm a person that spends a lot on traveling because that's my definition of financial independence and success. But I'm very intentional about that. So what I want you to really think here, and you that are listening to this episode, is what are some of the things that you have not been intentional? What are some of the things that you can see around your house? What are some of the things that you can see in your bank account that you are not being intentional? And apply this habit that Bernadette has just given you. Because honestly, when we do that inventory, we realize I didn't even notice that I spent on that thing, right? I don't really feel connected to, I don't know, I'm looking here at my living room, don't really feel connected to that Christmas tree anymore, just to say something. And then is when your financial decisions are going to come. Is that the kind of like the meat of the habit that you transmitted?
Your secret word is habit.
Yes, absolutely. I love that you translated it into something tangible for people, like looking at your living room. I tend to find a lot of unintentional things in my kitchen because I will, buy that tool that seems like a really good idea and then you use it one time or you don't use it at all and then it just kind of clutters up your kitchen. And I also tend to find money that was spent on, in particular, like skincare and health kind of things where just like for a long time, I was just kind of following fads of just like, Epsom fats are in and this thing is out. And so I should try this thing instead of, really sticking to a routine or a habit of like, if it was already working for me, then just, stick to that versus always trying to look for something new. And I really love that you connected that of saying, well, if I don't have a cash flow cushion and I'm constantly looking at a low balance in my checking account, really, how focused am I going to be when I'm trying to run my business? Am I going to be running my business out of fear? Or am I going to be running my business from a place of abundance? Right. And so that's really, I love that you mentioned that because that is most people, and especially women of color that I know, tend to run their businesses out of fear of running out of money, not from the idea that there's so much money to be had out there. It's just mine for the taking.
Yes. And because of that, I loved and I want to talk about the tip, let's call it, or strategy that you mentioned about consolidating all of your accounts. And to have that, because let's talk about that one. And then I'll tell you why I love it so much from the mindset perspective. So what is that about consolidating all of your accounts, and what does that for you in your financial independence process?
Absolutely. So, Crush Your Money Goals is called Crush, because it spells out the word crush. And so the C in Crush stands for curator describing. And what I tell people if you want to just kick off your financial independence journey, the first thing you got to do is take inventory of what you actually have going on in your finances. And most people don't know. And so your first job is to grab all of your checking accounts, all your savings accounts, anything that has money in it, your investment accounts, any debts that you have, every single credit card that you have open, every single personal loan that you have out there, and then any property that you own. So things like, if you own a home, if you own a car, and just knowing where everything is and how much everything actually has. And I have been so surprised now that even years later, and I've had hundreds of people come through my programs, that people still come to me and say, wow, that was the most useful thing that I've done, because I didn't know that I had this old 401k sitting out there. I didn't know that I had this Robinhood account that I forgot that I opened up 5 years ago, like during the pandemic, and so what is really important about that, and why I chose the word curate instead of collect or instead of clean up, was because someone who actually curates the definition of the word curate is to be able to hone in and to be able to identify with a certain level of discretion. So just because a credit card offered you, X amount of points doesn't mean that you should keep it forever. Or just because you have the savings account because it went with your checking account means that you should just leave it there forever. And so curating your accounts basically means that you are being very discerning and very specific and intentional about what accounts you keep. And you try to keep it to the minimum amount of counts that you absolutely need, because then it's less things to have to manage down the road.
I love it. I love it. And I tell you, the reason why I love this so much and how it connects to driving your business from an abundance place and not a scarcity is because when you know what you have, when you know where you stand, you can draw a better financial outlook for yourself. You are not drawing a plan, or you're not drawing a vision based on, well, I never had it and this is what I want, or this is where I want to get. You're actually sitting into, this is where I am, all of my accounts, and you will be surprised how different from what you are expecting or from what you have in your mind the number comes when you really curate your accounts. It is much more than you can remember, because intentionality has not been part of that journey. And when you're not intentional, your mind tends to forget. So that number that you will see, it's completely different to what you felt that you had earned. Just to put you an example, when you do your taxes for your business, you will realize how much money you made, and you will realize how much money you will spend. The problem is that you realize it at a date or in a moment that your mind is not willing to see the abundance, but it's only thinking about taxes, like, oh, I need to pay taxes. So if you implement this tip or this first step of curating your accounts before that and really are on top of it, what you're going to do is to really create the notion and understand where you are right now from a 360 view that, to me personally, completely changes the view. I am not working here because I never had it. I'm working here because I already did. This is how much I have done, and this is where I want to go. What is the difference, and what is the plan that is going to get me there? I hope that was understandable. But that is really the power of this first step that I see on your framework. And it has changed really the game for me and for many of the people that I work with, just to seeing it right there. Okay. So I am going to ask last question that, let me see. Yeah. Last question that you guys have submitted. So I am trying to balance long-term financial goals with the immediate needs of my family, like covering the holidays expenses. What is the best way that you have to tackle this?
Okay. So since we're at the time that we're recording this, we're coming up right on the holidays, and this comes up every year for me. Everyone always asks, what's the best ways to save up for the holidays and stuff. So the first thing that I will tell people is I really want you to focus, and like we talked about this whole time, about intention of what is your intention when you spend the money for the holidays. There was an article that I just read this morning that said that 34% of people who host Thanksgiving somewhat regret it because it costs so much to host Thanksgiving. If you think about hosting like a big dinner party for all of those people. And so really, that's interesting to me to say like, well, what was your intent in spending that money? And if you regretted it, it's not necessarily that you did something wrong. I learned that when people regret their spending choices, it's usually because it's not aligned with their actual intention. So by being very clear about your intention first, meaning like, am I spending this money so that people will think that I care about them? Am I spending this money because it makes me look good? Am I spending this money because I genuinely want to see the smile on this person's face? Am I just buying stuff to fulfill an obligation? And really decide what your intention is going to be. And then after you decide what that intention is, then you spend accordingly. So I'll give you a prime example from myself, going back to my Filipino family. When I first got out of college, I was so stressed out for my first my first Christmas post-college, because there was an unspoken rule in my family that if you have a job, then you have to get gifts for everybody, which at the time was like 30 people. And this is my first job out of college, and I wasn't making that much money. And I specifically remember the day of Christmas Eve, I was like going around to all these different stores with my like boyfriend at the time. And I'm being like, oh my gosh, my family is going to think something of me if I don't bring gifts for everybody.
Right.
Looking back, I realized I was spending money not because I actually wanted to bring joy to people or because I really like loved gift giving. I was giving out gifts because I felt obligated that I should. And so for any of you who are feeling that pinch from the holidays, chances are you're competing with like obligation and like what is actually reasonable for your finances and what your intent is. And if your intent is to make someone feel special and good, then focus on the few people that you want to feel special and good. And the more practical tip that I would give people is going back to that dollar rule is if you are going to give gifts to somebody, consider using the dollar rule as a way to gauge whether or not that's something you want to give to somebody, as in like, if they're actually going to get really good use out of it, and it's going to actually help improve their lives, and maybe it's a great gift to give. But if it's something that's just like a tchotchke or something that just they're going to open for Christmas and then just kind of forget about it, maybe it's not worth spending the money.
I love it. And I will just add to the long-term goals for your business. Here's the thing. You always are looking to long-term, but you're also, and this reminds me of volunteering, tracking rhinos in Zimbabwe. How we are taught to track rhinos are you always have the vision of the horizon, but you need to pay attention to your immediate step. What this means with your money is that you have to have your vision. Where are you going? What you want for your business? How are you growing? What are the goals that you have for 2025? And see how that intentionality with everything that we just shared fits today. Because you have to have both visions at the same time. And yes, holidays are charged with emotion, with society things, with family things, with guilt, and all of these around moralistic narratives. But coming back to the intention and the $1 rule, it is the way to solve kind of these dilemmas that we navigate with money, especially during the holidays. I want to close down with hearing from you. What do you want people to remember from this book in particular? What was your intention, going back to intention, when you were writing this book that you want that person to have after going through these pages and going through the habits that you shared there?
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been such a joyful and just very transparent conversation, very refreshing. And so the book, it's coming out December 10th, and I wrote it with the intention of it being the book that can sit on someone's nightstand for a long time. Oh, yes, you have your copy too. And so what I mean by that is that it's a quick, it's a read in the sense of like, it's not that hard to get through. It's fairly simple, but it's, in terms of actually implementing it, it could take you years to implement what I'm talking about in the book. And so don't get discouraged, and definitely don't try to implement all 25 habits at the same time. But my intent was that this book could sit on your nightstand for the next 10 years and it would still be relevant 10 years from now. And so my hope is that when you decide to prioritize your finances, you might pick up the book and try a new habit. And then once that habit sticks, then you might move on to the next one. And so I'm encouraging everyone who is trying to up-level their money habits and reach financial independence is, of course, grab the book. But aside from grabbing the book is to actually commit to answering some of the questions in the book, the prompts, and then trying the habits before you say that it's not possible.
Love it. And here's the thing. If you want to get some of the nuggets that we talked about on a PDF along with one gift that has for you, then go to the show notes and download the unique PDF that we are doing specifically for this episode. You're going to get all of her tips. I already download that and I know they're very good. So you might want that, but you also will get the transcript and the takeaways of this episode. So don't miss out on that and just scroll a little bit on the episode and download it right now. Okay. Did you hear something that you liked in today's episode? If so, don't keep it to yourself. Go ahead right now. Yes, right now, before this episode ends, and send this episode to those 3 friends, 3 girlfriends that you know you can go to talk about finance, independence, money, business growth, entrepreneur life, and all of these juicy topics. Share this episode with them because that is the only way we can grow together. I'm Alejandra Rojas, your host, and I will see you next week.